Testing 1 2. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Transportation Committee meeting. Before we get to the formal agenda, I'd just like to make a few comments. And I'd like to start today's meeting by acknowledging a significant accomplishment for our transportation planning staff and this committee and City Council. Downtown Moves, the plan for how people will move around Ottawa's core after the Confederation Line is running, has won 4 awards from national, international, and regional planning associations. The Canadian Institute of Planners gave Downtown Moves the 2014 Award for Planning Excellence in Sustainable Mobility, Transportation, and Infrastructure. Downtown Moves won the 2014 National Citation Award from the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. In the Ottawa Urban Design Awards for 2013, Downtown Moves won the Award of Merit for Visions and Master Plans. The study was the 2013 Merit Award winner in the International Downtown Association Achievement Awards. Downtown Moves was created by Planning and Growth Management's Department Transportation Planning Branch. I know that this project involved a team of people, including key support from Nancy Shepherd and her staff, but I wanted to note that Nelson Edwards is the project manager. I think Nelson is in the audience. And Vivi Chi, who's sitting over at the table on the far right, is the manager of the branch. So thank you very much for all the hard work. Downtown Moves has shown us how streets can be redesigned and rebuilt after the heavy surface bus traffic comes off the downtown streets in 2018, when the Confederation Line is running and 47,000 commuters are arriving downtown via light rail each morning. The study shows us how we can build an integrated transportation system downtown with strong pedestrian links, good vehicular access, much better cycling facilities, and greatly improved city street landscapes. The impact of this plan is citywide as well. The demonstration street designs developed for Downtown Moves were used to shape the city's approach to complete streets, which are improving our transportation network today and will continue to do so in the future. The study will give us tangible results. The first major initiative to come out of the plan is the Queen Street Renewal Project, for which an environmental assessment is completed and construction is scheduled to begin this month. This will be the first of many capital projects that are guided by the solid planning work of the Downtown Moves study. So once again, staff, thank you so much for your hard work in making this happen. And on a similar note, we got a lot of positive feedback on the cycling update that the committee provided just a little while ago. And so in that vein, I'm giving staff direction this morning if they can carry out a similar exercise with an update in regard to the pedestrian plan, and then that can be provided to this committee prior to the end of this term. Does that work for you? Okay, thank you very much. So now on to the meeting itself. First of all, Councillor Blois sends his regrets. There were no declarations of interest received. Confirming the minutes of June 4, 2014. Thank you. Communications as received. The first item on the list is the Baseline Road Rapid Transit Planning and Environmental Assessment Study Area Extension, Prince of Wales Drive to the Southeast Transit Way. Anybody want to hold this? Can we carry it? Carried. Thank you. Next is the Bank Street Leitrim to Rideau Road Environmental Assessment Study. Carried. We have to get to, which I should actually have said to, so first of all, it's to receive the results of the Bank Street, Leitrim Road to Rideau Road Environmental Assessment Study as described in this report and supporting documents, and direct staff to finalize the environmental study report and proceed with its posting for the 30-day public review period in accordance with the Ontario Municipal Class Environmental Assessment process. I'm assuming it's still carried? Excellent. Number 3 is the temporary outdoor patio encroachment, 713 Somerset Street West. Carried. Number 4 is the temporary outdoor patio encroachment, 225 Strathcona Avenue. And I believe we have some delegations for that. And also Councillor Chernyshenko has a motion which I'll ask him to introduce when we get to that item. Number 5 is the temporary outdoor patio encroachment at 426 Rideau Street. I note that we do have a delegation for that matter, but it is the applicant. Does the applicant need to speak if the committee is going to vote in favor? This is carried? Yes? Okay. Thank you for coming down today. And information is previously distributed. Okay, so we go then to number 4, which is the patio proposed for 225 Strathcona Avenue. And I'd like to ask Councillor Chernyshenko to introduce his motion at this point so that we can ask questions or make comment on it as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will read out the full motion. It isn't that long, and it gives the background here. Whereas a number of community concerns were raised in response to the patio application of Erling's Variety Restaurant, the applicant at 225 Strathcona Avenue, and whereas the location of the proposed patio is immediately adjacent to a residential community, and whereas the applicant and a group of residents have met to work out a compromise, and whereas the applicant has agreed, in addition to the conditions set out below, to direct his staff and patrons to smoke closer to Bank Street and away from the neighboring residences, to install a butt-stop ashtray in this area, and to ensure that suppliers do not block traffic or make deliveries on Sunday mornings. And whereas the Ward Councillor will continue to work with staff to delineate the angled parking and identify that there should be no parking that would obstruct the city lane, and implement solutions that would minimize bumper overhang on the angled parking, therefore be it resolved that the recommendation in the staff report be amended to make the approval, quote, conditional upon having the patio cleared by 9 p.m. and the installation of a privacy screen on the side of the patio next to the residences. Thank you. Yes, so it goes to bed at 9.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Many residents go to bed at 9.
Now, we don't have a presentation per se, but we have staff here available to answer questions. And I believe, do the delegation still wish to speak in light of the motion? Okay. So perhaps we'll hear from the delegations first. Oh, sorry. So the first delegate is Natalie Quinn, I believe. Good morning, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak about the proposed patio on 225 Strathcona. Until today, we haven't had the opportunity to voice our opinions. The official report suggests there is a 50% split of support for and against the patio, and I find that hard to believe. I have a petition signed by 19 neighbors requesting this committee defer the vote on the proposed patio. We feel there has been inadequate consultation, and some neighbors were completely unaware there was a proposal for a patio. Right now, we are dealing with the implications of the bar on our street. The owner has spoken with David Chernyshenko to deal with the residents' concerns. David Chernyshenko sent a detailed email to the residents on June 24 about his meeting with the owner to mitigate the residents' concerns, and Mr. Chernyshenko addressed 8 of those concerns. One was about the delivery trucks. The owner would instruct the suppliers where they should and should not stop. And after this, on June 26, I took a photo of a delivery vehicle illegally parked in a no parking zone and blocking driveways. I also have a photo of delivery vehicles that often have no problem blocking our driveway. This has not been addressed. The plan also stated that the staff smoking will be moved to the mid-alley location and closer to Bank Street. And then on June 27, after I picked up my daughter from school, 2 of the staff members were smoking in front of our house. They don't care that they are small children, and the owner clearly has not addressed these issues. There are many more issues that we have a problem with, and this will only exacerbate with the patio. I think it would be best to defer the vote and have the owner actually resolve the existing problems with the residents who have lived on the street for a long time. The restaurant just moved in, and everyone has to adjust to their lifestyle but them. And if the patio is approved, my concern is the width of the patio will not accommodate for strollers or wheelchairs and force pedestrians to cross the street. Cars turning onto Strathcona already have an obstructed view of the street, and pedestrians forced to cross the street could be hit, and this could create legal implications for the City of Ottawa. Councillor Chernyshenko wants to explore measures of preventing parked cars in front of the restaurant from protruding onto the sidewalk, but if some of the large vehicles don't park over the sidewalk, then the road will not be accessible for other vehicles to turn onto. And in the report, under the accessibility impacts, the report neglected to cite that the city will allow for the sidewalk to be 1.2 meters, but if there is a car protruding onto the sidewalk, the allowable space gets reduced to 1 meter. And this would break the law, but it is not enforced. Another concern I have is the increase of drinking and driving on our street. We live on a residential street that is a one-way with lots of children, and the report neglects to cite any legal implications. We shouldn't pretend this couldn't happen. When I was 8 years old, I was hit by a drunk driver walking home from school, and it is a reality. This report is flawed, in my opinion, and vague about any implications on the city. And I question the repeal of the 2011 bylaw that prohibited outdoor patios to be within 30 meters of the residential property. I would like to know if 3 meters is acceptable, then what would not be acceptable? And I would like to express support for all my neighbors' opinions who will be speaking today, and hope that the committee would agree to defer the vote until August for the residents to have proper consultation and rectify the current problems that has been created on our street. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, if we did defer, it would have to be until September.
Okay.
So are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah. You mentioned you wouldn't have enough room left on the sidewalk for strollers or wheelchairs. Is that because the distance is too short, or are there things like light poles and things in the way? Or what is the distance that you see there that makes that happen? Because we're supposed to always have that still available.
So when the cars park in the parking lot, it parks on an angle, and the cars have to come closer up to the sidewalk. So even if the sidewalk is, it says if it is 1.2 meters, the cars will block the...
And the angle of the car means they the front of the car is over...
protrude onto the sidewalk.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much. The next delegate is Justine Price. Thank you and good morning. You have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. First of all, I'd just like to express my support of my fellow neighbors and everything they say. My first item is a concern about the long-term effects of approving a patio, even with the conditions attached. It does put the onus on the residents to police and monitor and contact bylaw officers when not followed, for example, smoking by staff in the driveway, illegal parking by deliveries, and potentially building an animosity between the business and the wrong kind of neighborly conversations amongst a strong and until now very positive neighborhood culture. We're very, very fortunate. My second item is another long-term concern that arises about future businesses at this site. This restaurant is lovely. It's exactly what you want to have open up in your neighborhood on Bank Street. But many businesses move on and close, as we know, particularly in the Glebe area. And what could open up on this site in the future with a patio, El Camino Taco, a Starbucks, so with just sort of the limits on future applications. If an early closure is agreed to, is this binding? How is it worded so it could be not be extended or apply to any other businesses that would open up there in the future? Would future businesses inherit the patio permit, the early closing time, or would it have to start from zero and reapply and start over for all licensing, including liquor licenses and permits? It's a question I don't know as a citizen. Item number 4, we are long-term residents. We have a long-term commitment to living in our residential street. We pay residential taxes, and we may see our properties devalued by having a patio on the street, as well as our quality of life. We do realize that we live in an urban neighborhood and we enjoy and support our dynamic area, and until now the commercial aspect has been on Bank Street, not our residential street. Item 5, I just wanted to bring up that the GCA, or Local Community Association, Glebe Community Association, has offered their support to us. Carolyn McKenzie is not able to be here today, but in her email, I'm just going to quote it. There was a strong consensus at the GCA board meeting that the patio application as it stood was not reasonable to nearby residents. A significant factor is the current bylaws allow for operation of a patio till 11, which is not deemed reasonable in such close proximity to residents in this case. It also recognizes that other impacts beyond noise levels need to be addressed. Additionally, it felt that to be meaningful, key mitigation measures should be made a condition of any approval. As a result, the GCA did pass the motion that while the GCA encourages and supports the promotion of a commercially vibrant, animated development of Bank Street, it respects the primary residential nature of the neighborhood. Given the late-night noise is a primary concern, the GCA supports the attachment of a clearly worded condition to any approval that would close no later than 9, close, defined cleared of all patrons. The GCA also supports all parties to engage directly in discussion to attempt to resolve or sufficiently mitigate additional resident concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is more a question, I guess, for Councillor Chernyshenko, and based on your comment about wanting to close the patio at 9 o'clock. Councillor,
I think as residents of the neighborhood, we would like not to have a patio, but that seems to be the stipulation, yeah.
But am I correct, Councillor, that in your discussions with the owner, they have agreed to this condition?
Yes, the owner indicated that in fact their lunch visibility and lunch crowd was of greater importance to them, and that clearing, and we clarified our own wording so that it was not just closing at 9 o'clock, it was cleared by 9 o'clock, and the owner has agreed to that. So I know that's an improvement for residents. It is still a presence of a patio into the evening. It's better, but I still know that they are concerned about the patio.
And am I able to get answers now about the future of licensing or patio permits, or is that
I'm actually able to ask that question for you now. I guess I was going to ask, if I may, Mr. Chair, staff to say, is this patio
Sure, we were going to save staff questions till after the delegations, if that's all right. But that's on the radar.
Okay. I'll note that and ask that.
Future considerations, future owners, future permits. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the delegation? Thank you very much.
Oh, can I just add one thing? Am I under 5 minutes? With the patio, I know one of the things they just mentioned about the bumpers bumping onto the street, and then you're probably thinking, it just occurred to me, sitting there putting maybe up a rail or something, that you may know in the wintertime we have issues with going around cars that park there in the wintertime because the snowbanks start to encroach on the other side of the street. So when SUVs park there, if they don't park with their bumper over there in the winter, we can't get through. So it's actually important in the winter that those SUVs do, if those SUVs were not parked with their bumpers protruding over the sidewalk on that side, on the snowbank side, we cannot get through. There's frequently times when our small cars are just squeaking through, just for seasonal considerations being Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions flowing from that comment? Okay. Michelle Oliver, please. Olivier, sorry.
Good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. I am Michelle Olivier. Our property is the most immediate neighbor to the location in question at 225 Strathcona Avenue. We are, in addition, members of the Glebe Community Association and have been long-term residents of Strathcona Avenue. As a resident, while there have been commercial activity at the location in question, these have always been 9 to 5 operations, Monday to Saturday, leaving evenings and Sundays unencumbered for the residents. The normal residential goings on in the neighborhood have been compromised with the opening of the restaurant and will further be compromised with the installation of the patio. I have several concerns with the proximity of the patio, not only to my own property, but to my neighbors as well. My first concern goes to the bylaw that was changed in 2011, where it was changed. The outdoor patios are within 30 meters to a de facto. Support to any patio abutting a residential property. In other words, if 3 meters, and that's all my house is 3 meters away. If this is allowed to occur, i.e. the patio is allowed to be installed, then, next time it'll be half a meter and it'll be right adjacent to someone else's property. My question is, was the staff report recommended the approval of the patio? According to my reading on the staff report, it was generated before any discussions were had, either with myself, my neighbor Kathleen LaRocque, and Councillor David Chernachenko. The report is dated June 13th, and our first meeting with him was subsequent to that date. So I'm unclear as to how the report could support a patio when there was not sufficient conversations had with anyone involved. My second concern is the noise level, specifically after 9 p.m. with patrons exiting the location, and at 11 p.m. with staff closing and exiting the location. While the owners can influence the staff, it is considerably more difficult to control patrons. The conversations which conclude an evening dinner and alcohol carry in the evening air. There are children under the age of 10 who live directly across the street, and their windows look down upon that intended patio location. I, for example, can no longer sleep with my window open, nor can many of my neighbors. My third concern pertains to the report, as I mentioned, and the inconsistencies which are within that report. They will be addressed by my neighbor, Kathleen LaRocque. I have a safety concern with patrons seated on the patio. They will be directly in front of cars parked as they park and leave the area. What about the vehicle? If a vehicle should have a malfunction, which could result in one of the parked vehicles jumping the curb and injuring a seated pedestrian. Finally, I would ask the committee to adjourn the approval for the patio until the residents have had an opportunity to provide our own report to the committee. Failing that, I would request that the committee include in its approval the motion by Councillor Chernachenko, which has been agreed to by the owner of Irving's Variety at our meeting on June 25th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much. Kathleen LaRocque, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes? Well, good morning, Chairman Aglai and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Kathleen LaRocque, and I am the owner and resident situated at 219 Strathcona Avenue, which is less than 6 meters from the proposed patio site. I tabled my objections as a resident in my letter dated March 26, 2014, that specifically addressed concerns I was already experiencing with the addition of a restaurant in such close proximity to my home and how including a patio would compound these immensely. These objections are part of the report submitted to this committee by Councillor Chernyshenko and Deputy City Manager Nancy Skeepers. I would like to express support for my neighbors who are objecting to the approval of a patio at 225 Strathcona, as they demonstrate the effects such a decision would have, and in doing so ask that the committee defer its decision based on the inaccuracies mentioned in the before-mentioned report. So in the report, in the background section of the report, I noted that it states, this application was referred to Transportation Committee, given that the objections remained. This phrasing reasonably suggests that an attempt was made to resolve objections, but until the meeting last Thursday, June 26th, 4 days before Canada Day and the weekend that most everyone is away or celebrating with family, there had been absolutely no attempt by the applicant to meet with residents to resolve or mitigate any concerns. He did meet with Councillor Chernyshenko and Senior Staff Member Derek Moody, but he made no attempt to speak to us. We attempted to speak with him. We spoke with his son, who portrayed himself as the owner. We were left to believe that the concerns we had would be addressed. We never knew that Robert was the owner and the person that had the authority to make change. It's due to Councillor Chernyshenko's strong persuasion that a meeting was obtained. The conditions and measures discussed at this meeting were not added to the report, and the late hour of the meeting did not provide ample time to disseminate the information appropriately to all concerned prior to today's meeting. So yes, we were handed that. They've made a motion this morning. The bylaw states under Section 66, if there are objections to the proposed outdoor patio, the general manager shall advise the applicant of the objection and allow the applicant a reasonable amount of time to meet with those persons objecting. My comments above clearly demonstrate the applicant did not make use of any reasonable amount of time to speak with objectors. Councillor Chernyshenko and Senior Staff Member Derek Moody commented in a prior meeting with residents, this type of action or non-action would not be considered in a favorable manner and may cause them to recommend a different outcome to the Transportation Committee. This, too, is not added to the report to committee. In the discussion section, it states, in keeping with the provisions stipulated in Section 66 of the encroachment bylaw, all residents, residential property owners, community association, BIA, and ward councillors would be circulated a copy of the proposed plans. This did not happen. The circulation only went to the Glebe Community Association after I requested an opinion from them and gave their planning committee chair, Carolyn McKenzie, the city staff member, Sarah Stevenson's contact information at the end of March. Carolyn sent the circulation to the BIA. So the process is what I'm speaking to that I understand in reading the bylaw. I don't think it was followed. And this speaks to how those measures were not made. Also in the same section is the statement, staff believe that current provisions of the bylaw, 11 p.m. closure and no music allowed, is sufficient to recommend approval of the application as the patio is within 30 meters of a residential zone. This is a very recent bylaw change, and wasn't it the intent of the 2011 repeal of the bylaw on outdoor patios within 30 meters to stop the way these applications were being approved outside the bylaw? What was happening at that point is that city councillors were bringing forward motions for exceptions, and so it was a roundabout to the bylaw. It is my understanding that the repeal was to approve patios that were closer than 30 meters, but on a case-by-case basis. Here it seems no consideration at all is being given to the proximity of the residential zone. In other words, if a 3-meter separation is deemed acceptable, as in this case, then what would not be acceptable? Ground zero. We are a driveway away, literally, and not a big suburban driveway. You're talking about an old glebe driveway that was used for a cart or a horse and buggy. They're just, some of them are very small. In that, the statement in the discussion section that the city staff have the right to revoke the permit, permit based on complaints. I urge this committee to consider why the onus should be put on the residents who are already experiencing a decline in their quality of life, now be made to police the situation that will only be compounded by allowing more patrons. Why not decline the application based on what we are already living? I would like to direct your attention also to Councillor Chernyshenko's comments on accessibility impacts. He states that the proposal was circulated to the AAC. The problem is that on paper the proposal looks feasible. However, the reality of the proposed site has encroachment issues on both sides of the sidewalk, and therefore the AAC did not have all the facts to render a decision. The financial implications state in the report that the encroachment fee would generate $6,400 in annual revenue. The report does not consider the loss of revenue from taxpayers as their property value decreases because resale value plummets due to no one wanting to live near a patio. And in closing, I refer to the request by the residents of Strathcona Avenue's signed petition submitted today to have this committee postpone decision until a report can be submitted with the necessary information to allow all involved to make an informed approval or dismissal of the request of this permit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, our next and I believe last delegate is Jamie Nowitzki. Is that close? If anybody else wishes to speak to this matter, they can sign up right underneath the TV screen in the corner there. Otherwise, this will be the last delegate before we go to questions to staff.
I've got Cameron with me today.
Okay. Morning, Cameron.
Residents. My name is Jamie Nowitzki, and we live 7 houses away from there. Again, already echoing what my neighbors have said, we've already seen an increase in traffic on the street. We've already seen an increase in late-night traffic, people coming out of the restaurant 11, 12 o'clock. Although they're walking to their cars, they are sometimes intoxicated, and they are making loud noise, and it's keeping us up at nights. What I'm also going to address today is the privacy issue. Number one, we have neighbors whose porch and balcony faces the patio. When sitting reading, they will now be on display, basically, to the patio neighbors. To the patio patrons, sorry. These close neighbors, including a young family who live directly opposite the patio, will have their comings and goings observed, as well as their outdoor family activities, their social time they host on the porch, and playtime with their kids observed by seated patrons. It's a safety issue, really. If I've got my little guy out there playing, I don't want people watching what time I'm coming home, what time these guys are going. He's going to be directly across the street at the Acorn Community Center. Every single day I'm going to be walking back and forth with people smoking and drinking there. That's not the type of environment that I would like for my child to be growing up with. We're used to the usual city traffic of pedestrians walking through the street, but they don't sit and observe us. Number two, the residents on our street have not actually had the opportunity to consult. I have not been consulted properly, and I was never notified by the owner that a patio was going in. Nothing has come to my mailbox. Nothing has come to me in person. I strongly oppose the implementation of a patio at Erling's for a number of legitimate reasons. We are a community culture of 20-plus kids on that street under the age of about 10. We all pay an extremely high premium to live on an urban residential street. Having continual smoking and drinking besides our homes every day is distasteful and not representative of the type of healthy local community we strive to develop for our children. Nearby neighbors have already hear patrons loudly leaving the restaurant at late hours. And would you want this next door to your home? And would you put this on a quiet street in Orleans? Also, simply investigating solutions for horizontal parking overlapping into the sidewalk is unacceptable. A resolution must be made here. Huge SUVs currently overlap onto the existing sidewalk on a daily basis. There are at least 20 young children on our block alone, and many families use strollers and need space. A patio and parked vehicles will certainly block the pathway, especially in wintertime when already in wintertime we only have one laneway the entire way instead of about 3. A patio and parked vehicles will certainly block the pathway. If there isn't enough space, the young kids will jaywalk across the street, and cars turning from Bank onto Strathcona, it is a very high-risk area. Perhaps remove the horizontal parking completely and extend the sidewalk. So instead, just have regular parking. Further, there is no way the restaurant will close its patio at 9 p.m. Let's be honest with that. They're open till 11. Why would you kick people off at 9? Why would you kick people off at 8? They're going to stay open. Those patrons won't leave. The restaurant owners will not fight with patrons who come back and support their business. From a cash flow perspective, they would lose money. Let's be realistic. If they build a patio, it will be open as late as possible like all other patios. They will not be closing at 9, and it will be up to the residents to police that. Questions for you guys would you, if you had a street with 20-plus kids on your block, would you like to have an alcohol-based patio as the gateway to their homes? Because that is the only way into our area. It is a one-way street. That is exactly what they see. People hang out too much now. Would you want this next door to you? Downtown is not a melting pot of shops and bars. We are a community here. Our street is our family. Would you allow this on a quiet street in Orleans? I don't think so. So this is a quiet street downtown, 2 blocks away, and Bank Street is completely different from our residential street. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation?
Oh, just would you have this on your street? 7 houses away.
Yeah, we can ask you questions. Unfortunately, you can't ask us questions.
Oh, we can't ask you questions.
But we hear you loud and clear.
All right.
And we have a last-minute delegation, and that's the applicant, Robert Vinola. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I guess in listening, and I'm very, empathetic to all the concerns of all the neighbors. I think that ever since we've opened the restaurant in December and in the months previous to that, when we were building the restaurant, we have listened and discussed with the neighbors. I thought we've had a very good relationship with the neighbors. We believe the restaurant to be a positive contribution to the neighborhood. There have been some issues, and we've been working with the councillor and the city to address those issues, primarily around the smoking, people throwing their cigarette butts on the sidewalk and things like that. So those are being addressed. I think the patio would be a positive addition to our business. It's something that's very essential these days to making a business operate, and I think we need it to ensure our viability. The area is zoned for commercial activity, and I think it's been there. I remember that place 50 years ago when I used to go there as a kid. So it's always been commercial. I think everybody is aware of that who lives in the neighborhood, and I think when listening to the neighbors and their concerns, we just want to distinguish between those things that are, relevant to this patio application and then other concerns related to, or parking and traffic that are beyond our control. And I think David is taking some steps to address those. The one comment about not meeting with the residents, I wasn't able to attend one meeting that David had organized because I had a medical emergency and had to go to the hospital, but then we subsequently did meet with the neighbors as well as the chair of the Glebe Planning Committee who, was positive about the application based on the conditions that were submitted and agreed to by myself and the city and David. Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Deans.
Yeah, me too.
Councillor, okay.
Well, thank you for being here, and this is one of it's for you. This is a difficult issue because you can see both sides. You can certainly see the concerns of the residents, and I can also understand that you want to be able to compete with other restaurants that also have outdoor patios. So I don't envy my colleagues' position of trying to find that happy median when maybe one doesn't really exist. But I wanted to ask you, is it your intention to have music on the outdoor patio?
No, none whatsoever.
So there'll be no music
No
outdoors?
music on the thing, cleared by 9 o'clock, as we agreed to. I'm not sure why the other, I forget your name, sorry, Jamie, was saying it won't happen. I mean, we can take the appropriate steps and make sure everybody is aware. So if the last seating on the patio is at 7:45, that will give people sufficient time to have their meal, have their beer, and we'll clear it out by 9 o'clock.
And you would have some signage up that says patio closes at 9?
Absolutely.
Something like that?
Yeah.
And is it your intention to put any visual or sound barrier around the patio that would, create some sort of a barrier between yourself and the residential community?
On the east side, yes, we're adjacent to the closest neighbors. That's what we would agree to. In front, there's parking area in the front for the city parking, so that is in itself its own barrier. On the front of the restaurant, it was just going to be open railing type arrangement.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, some of the questions I wanted to ask, but just a quick follow-up before we get to Councillor Chernyshenko. On the issue of signage that Councillor Dean's raised, Councillor Chernyshenko's motion speaks to the patio closing down at 9. We've heard a concern about that. Would you be comfortable, and staff jump in if this is something we can't do, but would you be comfortable with a friendly amendment to Councillor Chernyshenko's motion whereby it actually indicates that you would post signage indicating the patio would, in fact, be cleared or closed by 9 o'clock?
No, I would agree to that.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Chernyshenko? Is that something that we can do, Mr. Moody?
Certainly it's something that could be added as a condition.
Okay. So perhaps staff can help Councillor Chernyshenko do the wording for the amendment for the motion. And Councillor Wilkinson.
On the sidewalk area, you've heard about the problem with the cars that the bumper tends to go over, and that does happen all the time. I've seen it, I've done it myself. That means that they would have to cross the road because you wouldn't be able to get around it if you had any kind of if you were just walking. And there's also a pay and display thing that I see on the sign. Would you be prepared if we wanted to put some sort of a barrier there so that the bumpers could not encroach onto the sidewalk? Because I think it's important that that sidewalk, if it is passed, be kept clear. Or if somebody's getting an approval of something, you can put special conditions on, and this one I think requires...
Councillor Moff, if you want to speak to that, it'll be an opportunity to do that. And I understand that you do, so I'll put you on the list.
Yeah, and it may be, I'll ask the same question to staff when we get to staff, but if that was something that would help to keep the sidewalk, because I understand the concern about crossing the road if the kids have to do that when you have a lot of traffic.
My belief is that there is lots of room. That's a very wide sidewalk there. And, the city has done the measurements, and the city has looked at it, and there's plenty of room for pedestrians. And it's certainly not a high-traffic area anyway. But
It doesn't have to be a high-traffic area. The numbers are so hard to see in this small plan. It was, I'll ask the staff on that from the setback, because the pay and display map thing gets a bit in the way at one point. But it is, they can go, I've seen cars go that far into a sidewalk when they're parking on an angle.
David did agree to have the city to look into putting, addressing that somehow to prevent the overhang. So
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'll wait till we get to that point then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. Keeping in mind there are certain, from the outset, I approached this looking at those responsibilities that are the city's and mine, and those responsibilities that are the owners, and we tried to craft a set of responses to the residents' concerns where we were quite clear whose bailiwick this was in, so to speak. And when staff come up, I'll get clarification about the parking related ones. A couple of items that were raised by neighbors that I thought led to questions where we could get some clarification from Mr. Vanola. Wintertime, your patio clearly will be a summer and a little bit into fall, a little bit into spring sort of operation. Will you be moving, sorry, I'm just noticing, clerk taking away that piece of paper you took were my speaking notes as opposed to suggested changes. Thank you. In winter, will you be removing some or all of what you put out for the patio? I.e., will there be any sort of obstruction in wintertime, where I understand that with snow accumulation in banks, this becomes even narrower?
Yeah, it'll be completely dismantled. There'll be nothing there.
Completely dismantled. All right. So the sidewalk will be returned to what we see today during the winter months.
Yes.
Thank you. That's very important to note. In fact, I would even add that if we could, whether that's a condition or noted in some form.
Mr. Chair, that's already a requirement of the patio permit.
That makes it even easier. Okay, so for repetition for residents, it's already a requirement. Thank you. I suppose this is something you've already agreed to. I just want to hear you say it for all of us. You do understand, you yourself are a non-smoker, I hear, and you understand the impact smoking has had. By banning smoking on our patios, we've ended up, and parks, we've actually pushed it sometimes in front of residences, which was not at all, it was an unfortunate byproduct of our becoming stricter on smoking. You do understand fully how much of an impact that is, and please describe the efforts you're going to be taking to control the smoking, both of your staff and your patrons.
So there'll be a sign on the patio directing patrons to smoke down towards the corner on Bank Street, as well as the receptacles for putting out their cigarettes, and then we'll maintain those and keep them clean so they can be used. You know, it's unfortunate that people smoke, but we can't ban that completely. And then our staff will, again, directed they must go down the street. Now, there was a mention that 2 staff were smoking on the sidewalk. I am aware of that. They went for a walk down the sidewalk. You know, it would be difficult for me to tell them they can't walk when they go on their break and walk down the road. They will not be standing in front of somebody's house, you know, and certainly the policy will be that they go on to Bank Street corner to smoke.
I understand it's difficult, but I do want to emphasize how important it is that you make your staff aware how much their smoking impacts neighbors. Absolutely. And that they have that regular reminder if necessary.
I tell them every day that it's going to kill them.
That eventually will catch up with them. I'm thinking more of the immediate.
No, absolutely.
Thank you. I do have questions for staff, but that'll come after.
Sure. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Councillor Moffat, you're good? Okay. And seeing no other delegations, thank you very much. And we'll move to questions to staff then, and the first councillor on the list is Councillor Hubley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Question for staff. We're talking here about this 9 p.m. Piece. If that's a condition of the approval, then that's fully enforceable by a call to bylaw, is that not?
Mr. Chair, if they do not follow the conditions of their approval, we can have the patio permit revoked at any time.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, how could a restaurant get approved in that location? Because what we're hearing is it's been a commercial location for years, but it was mainly a 9 to 5 operation. What in the rules allowed it to get extended into a use that would continue into the evening like this, and then set this up for the discussion that we're having today?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact zoning for that property in front of me at this time, but it is a commercial building and has been historically been a commercial building. I've heard anecdotes of it being a garage at one point, an art supply store, various other businesses from time to time. There are a list of permitted uses within the commercial zoning that are permitted on that property as a legal right, and a restaurant is one of them in this case.
Well, usually when we have commercial operations, there's hours of operation, for example, might be part of the approval. So in this case, we don't have anything that says that it needs to be done at 6 or totally done by 9? None of that's in there?
Mr. Chair, that would be not through the zoning. That wouldn't be a condition. It may be a condition through business licensing, which I'm not really in a position to speak to myself. But the condition that we're looking at imposing is strictly on the patio portion, and it is to have the patio cleared by 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
Just ask staff to clarify one thing. There was some question about the distance or the width of the sidewalk. Can you just confirm, and the report says it fairly clearly, but the distance between the edge of the patio and the pay and display machine is 1.8 meters?
That's correct, Mr. Chair, and we are looking at imposing a condition that the unencumbered sidewalk width, so free travel, be 2 meters in that location. So either the patio will have to stay away 2 meters, while the initial proposal was for 1.8 from the pay and display machine. The condition of the approval is that it would have to be a 2 meter unencumbered sidewalk. So that would be either the pay and display machine will have to be moved to accommodate 2 meters, or the patio itself will have to be adjusted to accommodate a full 2 meter unencumbered sidewalk width at that location.
I mean, 2 meters is obviously a decent width. When we talk about multi-use pathways, they're 3 meters with 2, bi-directional, really. When we do multi-use pathways, they're 3 meters, so 1.5 in each direction. Obviously, 2 is fairly sufficient as long as you can move that pay and display box. As for a barrier being charged by the property owner, or being put in by the property owner, that's the business, that's insane. I mean, obviously, that's the city responsibility to fix that issue. If we have traffic coming over that curb, then, I trust the councillor, the ward councillor sitting next to me, to deal with that issue with city staff, but certainly that should not be put on the business owner. It's not their responsibility to monitor traffic in front of their business.
Thank you, Councillor Moff. I'll take that as a comment as well as a question, and people feel free to do both during your time period. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, I just wanted to go through what's the process when somebody applies for a patio permit when it comes to distribution of the information to make sure they know in the neighborhood. Can you just go through that real quick?
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Ernest to jump in if I waver off course. He's much closer to the nuts and bolts of the process than myself. But any resident within 90 meters would have been circulated a notice with the proposal for the patio and inviting comment, which was done. We circulated about 225 residents for this particular application. We received, as the report says, we received a number of comments back, both in favor and opposed to the patio, with a number of concerns that are also identified in the report.
And just saying that, so that's physical mailings that they would receive at their household or a letter in their box to provide those comments back. How far in advance, like this process, it's been pretty long. I don't think this is just yesterday letters went out kind of thing. How long has this gone on for?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact date of the mailing that went out, but the comments that were provided were received in March.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's going to be a combination of comments and questions to staff. I'll start by the question. The process, if ever a committee decides today to support the application, would be that there is a yearly review because it is in a residential zone, correct?
Mr. Chair, all of our patios are annual permits, and we do have the opportunity at any renewal point to address issues raised by the community. If there are ongoing noise complaints, we do have the opportunity to not renew the patio permit on an annual basis in any application.
I'm bringing that up for the purpose of residents because in the area that I represent, there's a lot of patios that are close to residential zones, and having them in some cases allow us to, well, not in some cases, if ever there's an issue with a property, patio related or not, having that patio actually brings the conversation to the business owner in the community year after year, and we're able to improve the situation. So if it is a snow removal issue, even if it's not patio specific, having that in the submission usually creates that coordination, or that network of contacts that enables that conversation. And I have to say that in the past we've had patios, and it's important to work with the community and the council for the area, but if there's a restriction for 9 o'clock, that is to be respected, and if it isn't, we've enforced them in the past. So I want to make sure that, from a resident standpoint, that you're aware that these conditions are strict, they're well taken care of, and if they're not, we have the abilities to remove the license. Generally speaking, I would just caution some of the comments or some of the presentation from the residents. We have to be careful that issues that are specific to the property, we have to differentiate between issues that are specific to the property or the owner and the patio. The arrival of a patio perhaps bring different issues, but for example, cars riding over the edge. That a patio is there today or not, if that is an issue, you need to address it in that context. So we just have to be cautious of that. If someone's intoxicated and going into the car and you're seeing that, the fact that there's a patio or not, it's an infraction. It's a call to 911. So I want to make sure that we differentiate that type of issue. They're very serious issues, but they're not linked directly to the patio. They might be linked to the business, but we have to be careful in terms of creating those correlations. I will be supporting the patio. There is a yearly revision. I would say that it's important to continue the conversation with the various stakeholders, and in the end, I'm sure that the bulk of the concerns would be able to be mitigated.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just followed up on what was just said. In fact, the cars going over is an issue because of the patio. Before the patio was there, you have a very, very wide area to get around it. When you get narrowed down, and having only 1.8 right now is not, and our minimum's 2, as staff just said, it makes it much more difficult. I've talked to some of the residents, and the problem of putting a barrier there and pushing the cars further out means the road becomes almost impassable because the road is so narrow and big trucks are going there. So that's probably, putting a barrier there is probably not the solution. I'll say that. The solution may be to change that to parallel parking instead of angle, and I think it's something that perhaps even if it stays there to start with, it should be reviewed to see if that would be something that could happen, because that can be done very quickly if it is causing a problem. I'll leave that with the local councillor to take a look at as it gets forward. The one other point that was made by Councillor Moffat, and I want to ask staff about this one, if we do an approval for somebody which ends up costing the city money because we have to move something, is that not normally the cost to that owner, because they are the ones that cause the cost to the city? We do this in the new areas. We say the cost of new development should be borne by the new development. If a patio is going there, the cost resulting to the city because of that should be borne by the applicant.
Mr. Chair, if the councillor is speaking to the direct cost of moving the pay and display machine, then yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. So anything that is directly caused by the applicant. But parking is not, and I agree with that. It's something we're going to have to review separately. But I would ask that you do take a hard look at whether putting parallel parking there would be a better solution, especially with the narrower sidewalk and with winter, because although in winter the patio won't be there, so hopefully that, because he says he's taking everything out, you'll be able to get around it. And there's also obviously an enforcement problem there, and I say to the residents, bylaw will come if you call. They're not always there. So if you really see a problem, call 311 and tell them. And they will come. They may not come for a little bit of time, depending how busy they are, but they will come, and people get the idea after a few tickets. They do start to be more careful. And I might also say to the residents, we all have patio issues and noise. I have patios within 30 meters of residential areas that go to 11 o'clock with outdoor music. And they're in a commercial zone, but they're close by residences, and it seems to be getting worse over time, and we're going to have to start. I think music is being played louder And so I'm going to do working getting them at least to turn the music off at 9 o'clock at night on that particular patio, because it is something that is very difficult for people in their homes, especially with small children, of which I have many, many, many small kids in my area. So I understand your issues, but that's not to say we wouldn't have patios. They're a nice thing to have in a community. So I will support with the modifications that Councillor Janaszewska has, and leave it with him. I know he's very open to trying to make things work for everybody, and he does a really good job of trying to do that, and I support what he's put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other, I know Councillor Chernyshenko has some questions for staff, but since it's his motion in his area, I want to give him the last kick at the can. Are there any other questions or comments that people want to make related to the motion of the report? Okay, Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you. I'll start with a few questions for staff, and then I suppose my summing up after that. I wanted to be clear, the patio permit, first of all, that it would be non-transferable. If someone came in, a new business, a new owner of the business, how do we treat with that? Reapply or automate? Let's imagine first that it's mid-season. Perhaps you can describe how that works.
Mr. Chair, and then the new business would have to apply for their own patio permit. If there were no physical changes to the patio, staff could approve on its own. If there were changes, we would undertake a new circulation process, and if there were objections, as there are in this case, we would be before this committee again.
Thank you. One thing that hasn't come up yet, we did during our discussions among those neighbors who were able to attend the very last minute, admittedly, meeting last week. This patio is actually, its permit is rescindable if there are several infractions. Is that not the case? And what would it take to rescind that?
Mr. Chair, the application is rescindable at any time if they don't follow the conditions of the approval. So if there are issues with the restaurant, for example, keeping the patio populated past 9 o'clock, that's something that we could clearly indicate that they're not meeting the conditions of their approval and rescind their patio permit at any time. On an annual basis, with respect to the renewal, there's also a review of whether there's been ongoing noise complaints or other general issues, that a review of that sort of nature that would take place, and that would come into play at the time of renewal, as opposed to whether they're breaching conditions of their approval.
Okay, thank you. The moving of the pay and display, we had talked about that as a possible solution on site. What's the process for doing that, and how long, if, I should put it this way, if in the end the parking solution continues to offer that, well, no, I won't go down that road. I think the parking solution we're looking at, it's irrelevant to the pay and display. How long does it take to do such a thing? What's involved?
It's fairly administrative in nature. It's working with our partners in traffic and parking operations to have it moved. It's not a major piece of infrastructure that requires a lot of planning to move it.
Okay, thank you. So if it's appropriate for me to sum up here then, end of questions. Thank you. Clearly the city has a number of, if this application is approved, the city has a number of steps that it can and I believe must take, mostly around parking. I certainly recognize, we were on site, we saw right in front of our faces several larger vehicles overhanging by what had to be at least 30 or 40 centimeters onto the sidewalk, and that was without actually mounting the curb, as one vehicle did. But also long vehicles can both be, if they are kept back from overhanging the curb, it in fact becomes a restriction to the width of what's otherwise a fairly narrow street. So I think it's important that we pursue the pursuit of parallel parking as opposed to angled parking as one avenue, and look at that and how many spaces would be lost and the implications of that. But at a bare minimum, that angled parking have some sort of addition to the curb so that it pushes vehicles back, that we also explore whether some sort of a small vehicles only signage could be added to some of those spots where it causes excessive narrowing of the road and turning difficulties off of Bank Street. Those are all, I believe, very essential. So I don't agree with this policy change in general that has led to the incursion deeper into residential areas than I think are appropriate. It's one thing to say on an Elgin Street, on a Bank Street, well, the business is right there on the corner and the patio is now going to be on the side street side as opposed to the main street side. What we've ended up here is a case where it's essentially 2 or 3 businesses down from Bank Street. It's right next to a residence. It's deeper into the zone. However, that is the policy that we've got, and in the end, I've had to conclude that we really have to treat this one as a trial that can be canceled mid-year, that can certainly not be renewed if this owner is not taking the serious steps that have been asked for by neighbors today and that I've called for and put into, in some cases, as conditions of approval. We've seen all unintended effects, as I mentioned once earlier. Smoking's been pushed deeper into residential areas when we say to people they not only cannot smoke on the patio, they can't within, I believe it's 9 meters of the patio. They can go 2 ways. One is to go to the main street, unfortunately. The other is to go right in front of people's homes. And that's something we have to be very aware of as an unintended result of making it healthier around the patio, potentially less healthy in residential areas. Initially, the initial circulation to neighbors within 90 meters actually received very little opposition. I heard very little. But I now know that was just a delay in a response as opposed to a lack of opposition. It took a while before I heard that there were serious concerns. I did hear there were serious concerns, and I do believe they are all, as much as it's for me to say this, legitimate and worthy of needing a response. Some are ongoing. I will wrap up here now. Some are ongoing and not attached directly to the patio. So some of those are conditions that are changes that Mr. Vanola has committed to, regardless of the patio outcome. Others are actually going to be new or exacerbated by the patio, and we now have in writing and as conditions those. And so, in closing, I would say this not with any sort of meanness, just as a reminder to the applicant, this is conditional. This is rescindable, so it really is up to the business to demonstrate to the neighbors that this is a good corporate citizen and neighbor. Otherwise, I will be very vigilant, and we will need to, review this and potentially remove it unless we see very clear respect for these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So first, we'll move to your motion. Which amends the report, and as amended my amendment to add in signage. It should be on everybody's screen at this point. And so I'll call the vote on the motion. Carried. And on the main report as amended by the motion. Carried. Thank you. We have no inquiries to date. Under other business, we have a motion from Councillor Hubley, which I'll give an opportunity to introduce in a second, and I believe that Councillor Fleury, though, is also going to be asking for a motion to waive the rules and be dealt with today, as will Councillor Hubley. So we'll deal with the waiving of the rules first. If maybe you could explain the motion, Councillor Hubley, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a housekeeping motion, so if you don't mind, instead of just the therefore be it resolved, I think it's good to read the whole motion in this case. So therefore be it resolved that given the abbreviated time period for this matter caused by the possibility that a bill may be tabled at Queen's Park prior to the next committee and council meeting, this new item be introduced pursuant to subsection 84, subsection 3 of the procedure bylaw. Whereas there are over 300 schools in the City of Ottawa, and enhancing pedestrian and cycling safety for children in school zones has been an ongoing priority for this City Council. And whereas the Highway Traffic Act allows for the doubling of speed-related fines when identified in construction zones and community safety zones, and whereas school zones and school speed zone signage is already in place in the vicinity of schools, and whereas installing community safety zone signage in a school zone would add signage clutter, be very costly, and detract from the prominence of school area signage, potentially decreasing safety, and whereas amending the Highway Traffic Act to allow the doubling of fines in school areas is a common sense approach to enhance the safety of our children as they walk or bicycle to school. And whereas the dissolution of the provincial legislature to hold the 2014 provincial election resulted in Bill 173, Keeping Ontario Roads Safe Act, dying on the order paper. And, almost done. Whereas a bill that is the same or similar to Keeping Ontario Roads Safe Act may be reintroduced in the Ontario legislature as part of the upcoming summer session, therefore be it resolved that the Transportation Committee recommend that City Council approve that should a bill similar to Keeping Ontario Road Safety Act be reintroduced in the legislature, that the City Clerk and Solicitor be directed to send a letter to Ontario's Minister of Transportation requesting that the Highway Traffic Act be amended to include the doubling of fines within a school area or school speed zones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So on the motion to waive the rules so this matter can be dealt with, carried? On the motion itself? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Fleury, you have a motion that you'd like to raise as well?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I circulated the motion with members of committee earlier this week, wondering if there's I can maybe provide background instead of reading the motion, since everyone would have received it. So we're resurfacing St. Patrick this summer. As you know, it's one of the worst roads in Ottawa. It feels like a rural road, a pothole, non-paved rural road.
Great roads.
You do have great roads. It wasn't an insult towards your roads. It was an insult towards the potholes that are on the street. Previously, we had submitted a request to the province to do some bridge repairs on St. Patrick, some road resurfacing, and some cycling improvements. It was a $9 million ask, and we were denied that application. And now we're in a situation where we're simply doing a road resurfacing, but there's some safety concerns along the corridor, and we're trying to mitigate those impacts, knowing that we didn't get the $9 million approval, that this road resurfacing project is a $2.3 million project. So we're trying to see if we can mitigate some of the risk and offer some alternatives, understanding that a lot of the eastern communities, Vanier, New Edinburgh, and others, to get to downtown, it is one of the preferred corridors, and there's a portion there that's adequate because of the east-west bikeway link, but west of Cobourg, between Cobourg and Beausoleil, there was in front of the Chinese embassy, really, there's quite the challenge there, as there's a lot of speeding, there's a lot of traffic, and we want to make sure that we allow that alternative to get cyclists outside, or to get cyclists an improvement of the infrastructure. For your information, so within the road resurfacing, we're not playing with curbs. We looked at all the dimensions. We wanted to see if there was a possibility of putting in a cycling lane, painted lane. The distance that engineers and all the parties at play looked at as a 1.1 meter lane, which is not within our guidelines. So we've walked down a lot of these opportunities. Now we're in front of you and asking to offer a multi-use pathway solution on St. Patrick, between Beausoleil and Cobourg, to offer that alternative for cyclists.
Thank you, Councillor Fleury. So on the motion to waive the rules so this matter can be dealt with? Thank you. Carried? Thank you. If we go to the main motion put on the screen, and I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I have a question for staff, so I'm not sure who's the lead on this.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
I haven't asked the question yet.
Oh.
I was just getting the motion on the screen, but I do have a question. And the motion indicates that, number one, that the multi-use pathway will be constructed this season if sufficient funds can be found within existing budgets. If not, then it will be put over to the 2015 budget process. I guess my question is, based on what Councillor Fleury has said, that we're in the process of working on the street now, does number 2 even make sense? Can we put the funding over until 2015, or does work in fact have to be done while the construction is underway this summer?
Chair, I will take it back to look at this with our colleagues in ISD and Public Works and see what we can do. And if the opportunity is only now, then we would have to investigate that and discuss it with the ward councillor.
Do we know what the cost of this project would be? I think people around the table might be more comfortable thinking how much money we were committing to this morning.
So the discussion has been we still have to design the multi-use pathway and build it. It's between $100,000 to $150,000 is what staff told us.
That's for the whole project, not just the design piece.
That's for everything.
And has staff given any, maybe you can answer this, Councillor, staff given any indication whether or not there's sufficient funds within the existing envelope for that project? Or will funding have to be found elsewhere?
They're looking at they're looking at everything. They don't know yet. I know they're still reviewing some of the projects this summer to see what's on budget and if there's rooms, but I don't know specific to this one.
Okay, so this is a question for the clerk, or deputy clerk. The way the motion is worded is it doesn't speak to the exact amount, but rather gives an overall recommendation. Can we give that recommendation without knowing how much money we're approving in effect?
We worked on this motion with staff, with the city treasurer, and with Mr. Mark, so this provides sufficient approval if it's within existing budgets. It would essentially give the budget, the authority to do the budget amendment to staff if it can be accommodated within existing resources. My understanding is that there is a September timeline. When we drafted the motion, we didn't have enough time to come back to take advantage of any savings and synergies that might happen.
Sorry, can you explain the September timing? The work has to be done by September?
We understood that the opportunity, if it's available, would be in early September to actually construct if it's possible and the funding is there.
So again, I go to my point about paragraph 2 of the motion. Is that even necessary? Even doable?
In terms of what you have before you is 2 options. If staff, if there are existing funds that can be moved to cover the costs, it would allow the work to proceed in September. The treasurer was fine with that motion. If there are not sufficient funds to move, then it would come to the 2015 budget process for construction next year.
No, and I appreciate that, and you're probably not the person to answer this question, but I guess where I'm going at, if there's ongoing construction, we're already on the road, there's a certain cost. If we have to go back next year and reopen construction, I'm assuming that cost is going to be higher, so that's why I'm trying to get some sense. No, I appreciate that. I know maybe Ms. Shepherd can help with that.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can you just repeat your question, please?
Well, yeah, there's a 2-part motion here. First is that funding be found within the existing budget, and second, if the funding's not available, that it be found in the 2015 budget year. The deputy clerk, giving us some construction advice, suggested that the window to do the work is actually September of this year. So if that's the case, I'm wondering why Part 2 is there at all. And if Part 2 is necessary, wouldn't it be more expensive if we had to go back next year after the main construction is done to effect reopen construction on that street?
So, Mr. Chair, we think that we can find the money. It's a short section of pathway that will significantly improve the connectivity in that area. And there is an opportunity and there is synergies to do the work together. We think we can find the money, but if we can't, we would have to do it similar to the WIP closures with some movement around, and we would plan to come back to you and seek approval for that. At this point, we think we can probably do it, but if we can't, we would have to come back in September to seek formal approval to do that shift.
And Councillor Fleury, when you were in the room, indicated that he thought the total cost of the work to be done would be about $150,000. Does that track?
I believe that's the right ballpark, Mr. Chair.
And when you say you're looking for funds, do you think, Ms. Shepherd, the funds will be available within the existing envelope for the overall project on St. Patrick, or is it going to be take money from elsewhere?
So we would look first to the existing project, and if there is insufficient funds there, then there may be some funds in a pathway account that has the mandate for investing here. If we have to go to another account that is for completely different purposes, we need to come back to you and seek your approval for that.
And is there any possibility in what you're proposing here that money will come from another project that is scheduled to be done this year?
It's possible that's where we find the funds, is from another project.
So, but what I mean by that is would that put an existing project that's been approved on hold?
Absolutely not.
So it would just be surplus funds?
That's correct.
That's found within, okay. All right, that's what I was getting at. Okay, I think Councillor Wilkinson has a question.
Thank you. It relates to a similar thing. I just was speaking with you recently about a situation in my ward where we desperately need to have something similar. And in this case, there have been injuries to seniors being run down by cyclists going to school. It's a very heavily traveled area for kids going to school. They're not safe on the road, which is an arterial road leading to a school. And you're going to try to, and I had some projects in future years, so I'm willing to give up to do that. So what I really want to know is, I don't like somebody, I see the need for this one just as badly as I see the need in my community for that one section mostly. But if we take the money from other projects for this one, then there's not going to be ones for others, and we haven't done an evaluation of which one is the most important. And I really think that should be done before we actually transfer money. So it's not that this can't go ahead if you want to add the Campo Drive onto that one, because I've had the problem there is it's a senior center there. The seniors walk along the sidewalk. The kids are not safe on the roads because there is a bike lane, but it ends at every corner, so they go on the sidewalk and they knock the seniors over, and several have already been injured. And we've had a child on a bike injured. It's been a very serious location for that. And staff are looking into it already on that case. And if you want to add on a look at for yours and also for Campo Drive on the north side, I would...
For bikes on the sidewalk, this year. We had that discussion at this committee and we voted for bikes on the sidewalk.
Councillor Hubie, if you want to speak to the matter, we'll put you on the list.
We'll get to that one in a minute. Bikes on sidewalks are not... We didn't have a motion on bikes on sidewalks. There is a problem with bikes on sidewalks when they knock people over and injure them and other things. So I'm just a little bit concerned about, as some others have mentioned, if the funding is coming from other projects, if it's within his own ward, I have absolutely no difficulty with it. We can change things around in our wards. I think that's something that councillors, I completely support them doing. And that's what I'm trying to do in my case, but I don't know whether I can get enough that way.
No, I hear you, and I guess all I can say by way of comfort is this matter, of course, will rise to council on the 9th of July, so that gives you a week to speak to staff and see if,
maybe we can get
something can be addressed or not in that regard. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Anytime I see connectivity solutions for cycling between downtown and the East End, I'm very happy. And I'd be at fault if I didn't bring it up for, 3 years in a row, my concern about Ogilvie Road. And I'm looking at this situation here where they're doing this construction. It sounds like from a budgetary perspective and a City Hall perspective, $150,000 is sounding relatively cheap. Can I assume that's because they're doing the construction on the road at this point?
There is some synergies with doing it now because there is construction work happening on St. Patrick's. You're right.
And I think I brought this up several times about the seriousness of Ogilvy Road. And I'll tell you right now, go for a drive down it today, it is completely destroyed. There is pipes, road lanes all over the place. You can't even tell which lanes to drive in anymore. But furthermore, its cycling has been an issue, even before they started digging up that road. So I'm really torn on this because I do see this as something necessary. I see the cost savings, exactly what I was trying to bring forward with Ogilvy Road while they're ripping it up. I understand there's some costing issues around that. But I'd really like staff to look at Ogilvy Road because it is the dark hole. You really cannot get from, it's like you hit the edge of Fleury's and Clark's ward, and there's nothing again until Innis. It's a real weird situation. So I will be supporting Councillor Fleury on this one because I do think it's very important. But again, I'm pleading with staff, please look at Ogilvy Road. It would be a simple solution in my mind and make it a lot safer for people today. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Hubert. Nope, off the list. Okay. Councillor Chernyshenko, who has left the room. Councillor Deans.
Well, I can certainly understand the point, and I also understand the point that some of my other colleagues are making, that there are important cycling missing links, not just here, but in other places as well. So I guess my question is, where does this one rank in terms of the priority list? And then the second part is, if it's at the top, why wasn't it included as part of this project?
So, Mr. Chair, it is a new project that has come up. It's around 400 meters, and it came up as an opportunity as part of the East-West Bikeway when we were looking at how we could improve the connectivity. Initially, we were talking about St. Patrick as it was identified, but the solution that we came up with is to put a multi-use pathway along the north edge of it. And it came up through suggestions and some innovation and different approaches that we were able to come up with this low-cost solution. And the synergy and the timing makes sense with the other investment. I think increasingly what you're seeing and what I'm hearing with the comments is that the use of multi-use pathways along roadways is becoming more and more of a pressure, especially where there is parts of well-established links there, and then we see ourselves with a missing link. And I would say that this is one of them, and it wasn't initially identified. I certainly can credit the ward councillor for working with staff to come up with an innovative solution, and we're here in front of you today.
Thank you.
Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Thank you. We are, as cycling increases and quite possibly walking is increasing too, we are seeing more and more conflicts between the two. It used to be more a worry of conflicts between vehicles and cyclists, although we haven't quite cured that one completely yet. Do we have situations where we're actually incorporating some form of traffic calming on our multi-use pathways, as odd as that sounds? Have we experimented with any, whether it's signage or the texture of the pavement, or, dare I say it, speed bumps for bikes, in areas where we might be seeing very high use, different mixed users on those pathways? And do we foresee experimenting perhaps with some of that?
Mr. Chair, the only comment I would make is that where we are seeing conflict points, for instance, we are paying a lot of attention to design. So where you have a multi-use pathway that is continuing through an area where you would expect a lot of pedestrian traffic, in particular around transit shelters and stops, that we are looking at innovative designs and design changes to make sure that it's very clear to the pedestrians and to the cyclists that this is a point of conflict. And in terms of pedestrians and cyclists using the pathway together, we have not done anything in that regard if they're on the pathway together like you see on the canal frequently in terms of traffic calming. So our focus at this point is really on those points of conflict that we're aware of.
Mm-hmm. Because certainly there's an etiquette, if I could put it that way, that is still evolving and needs to evolve further about cyclists respecting slower moving and more unpredictable users of the path, use of bells, etc. I'm just thinking that we should be looking at treatments in certain cases, whether it's the path with modest curvature in the pathway or some type of change in the texture where we'll actually force the faster moving cyclist to slow down and show respect if they haven't adopted those behaviors themselves. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one. Going back to what we were talking about, the funding and the matter going ahead on July the 9th. Ms. Shepherd, would you be in a position prior to the 9th or on the 9th to inform committee and council members as to whether funding is available in the existing envelope?
Yes, I will take that away, Mr. Chair.
I think everybody would feel better if we knew that before the final vote on council. Thank you. Calling the vote then on Councillor Fleury's first to waive the rules. I think we've done that. Yep, sorry. On the motion itself? Carried. Okay. Are there any other business? So I'll call for adjournment then. Carried? Carried. And the next meeting is September the 3rd rather. Thank you.